The Futurist. The mysterious man behind Jeremiah's takeover of Nebu reveals himself and further assists Jeremiah in making his dreams come true. Inhabitants of Nebu are suppressed and mesmerized by Jeremiah's influence, but it's the Futurist's true objective that spells doom for all who oppose and try to liberate Nebu from their grasp. Will you oppose or assist Jeremiah in the Futurist? So this was a big event because this pretty much is what's wrapping up everything that's happening overseas in Nebu between Jeremiah and all of Nebu. First off, obviously in this event you see the Futurist reveal himself. The Futurist is actually an NPC that was submitted by Jeremiah way before he knew that he would once be allied with the Futurist. This was just a villain that he'd submitted. I'm the one that decided to turn this villain into something bigger, going as far as to making the Futurist actually one of DefTude's allies. A question that a player submitted was, can we get the full background on the DefTude gang? So the DefTude gang, this person referring to, are all of the masked peers of DefTude. And if you believe it or not, all of these masked villains were actually revealed, and I think it was the first season. Yeah, it was the first season. You actually could see all of them appear when Bloodvein. So Bloodvein is they were a dynasty. Emperor. I can't remember the first emperor's name, but they were assassinated by Ryan Zaidi, I think, in the prequel. And then the person who took the emperor's place was Emperor Bai Wang. And Bai Wang took his father's place and shifted all of the dynasty's scientific efforts into life sciences, because he felt it was more important to move away from the drug trade and focus on life sciences such as gamma mutations. And the person who led that branch of Bloodvein's life sciences was DefTude, and we are introduced to DefTude when he walks out with his scientific peer, his peers, and it was 5 scientists. And that's when you actually see all of these people who would reappear today. DefTude, they were all relatives of DefTude. DefTude, they were like his cousins, because it's a family thing, and DefTude being the youngest. This is before that we knew DefTude was a lich. This is before we even knew about the liches, the instigator, and the other chick. This is before we know anything about DefTude at all, who, by the way, is a much larger character in previous games that I ran before, but I was able to kind of expand on him in Gamma Haven. But yeah, you first see DefTude and all of these people who would walk out of these portals with these masks on, you know, way back in the series. If you recall, when Makai and his father actually attack Bloodvein Dynasty, if you remember, Pargaigus was that samurai, like that protector, that guardian of the emperor. Pargaigus, he was equipped in the Gaigus armor, and he was the one that was facing off against he was a peer of Emperor of General Ma Jin, And remember, Majin was someone that Ryan Zaidi replaced. He replaced him. And ended up killing Makai Fenoichi. Poisoned the Roaring Dragons and so on and so forth. But you gotta, if you remember back when Pargygus was protecting Bai Wong, remember, lightning stab, and you know, they fought and all that stuff. That was all part, you know, the Gygus was protecting the Emperor. But anyway, the Deftooed gang is just a branch of scientists that were in charge of studying life sciences, which makes sense for Deftooed and what he was really doing, what he was really on the planet doing. Eventually, he would ring them in and I guess make them more aware of what's happening and why, who they're actually serving, which is the Emperor Nuad of the Endless. But it's safe to say that the only person that's actually a undead lich is Deftooed, and then there's the Instigator. But they are all pretty much pawns of Deftooed. And they've all separated and had their own objectives. One Deftooed, his goal was to orchestrate all of this, as he said, to get all the girls together. That was another scientist's objective, was to get all the girls together. So he pretty much got the assistance of Mistress Sheila Scorn. Another one was to pretty much grow a G-type that is capable of moving the planet, and that's Corrigan. He was in control of Corrigan to move the planet. Then you have another masked man who was in charge of getting a group of guardians, and that's the people in the Gygus armor, Looper, Poke Turner. So he was using Geneva, the Queen of Darkness, to kind of help him orchestrate that. So they were all sitting their separate ways to with an objective, and which in the end would all come together to perform these rituals and kind of get everything in, have everything fall into place. So yeah, that's pretty much these are things that I always planned to have come back into fruition, but everything that happened between point A and point B would be determined by what you as the characters would do and the decisions you would make, obviously, right? If a lot of those characters could have been killed way back if one of you decided to kill them. So again, a lot of what's being laid out it's all open to be changed based on the actions of the players. So that's who these masked people are. They were first revealed in way earlier episodes, but this is before you knew that they were important. And Deftooed pretty much brought them back, all for the sake of bringing back the Emperor. So obviously, when you have the Futurist here, I was like, oh man, it would be cool if he was actually one of the scientists. And so I made him one of the scientists. And he has great power over dreams. He has a dream power, and he's the one who's been helping Jeremiah bring his dreams into fruition. Jeremiah is oppressing Nebu by manipulating the Venomous gang, who's led by, I can't recall her name at the moment, I'm sorry. Venomous, what's her name? Can't remember her name, but she technically is the leader of Nebu. She's a native to Nebu. And she wants to run the nation. She looks up to Jeremiah. She wants to run it like Jeremiah runs his business. Meanwhile, Nyla and Vector are locked up. Still, they had to use a story option to escape. That's why we see them locked up. Shiro is still free. he got displaced by Poke Turner, teleported into the Atla Mountains. We see him walking through the snow. He finds shelter. He runs into some people who take care of him. Meanwhile, while he's healing, he's using his last clone to traverse the council chambers to free Nyla and Vector. But Shiro runs into Jeremiah's boys. Now Jeremiah has some allies now. These are players that this would be their first episode. One being the collective, an interesting character, and then the mental Jin Dennis Bateman, who was an assassin in a blue suit. Very interesting characters, just like Jeremiah. Jeremiah is an interesting character, so I thought it was funny that the people that join him are just as weird and interesting and unique. The mental Jin Dennis Bateman is a blue suit, suave, egotistic assassin. The collective is a freaking weirdo hacker, corporate hacker who's been hired by Jeremiah. Jeremiah hires all these different people to work under him, and they are pretty much the enforcers, right? So we're first introduced to Dennis Bateman and the collective, because Dennis Bateman, being an assassin himself, sneaks up behind Shiro and takes him out. Shiro tries to poison him, which was actually in Shiro's submission. But it's funny because the collective has these nanobots that were specifically designed to protect anyone from any kind of poisons or anything like that. So those kick into play. It was like a perfect counter. You would have thought the collective read Shiro's submission, because it was so uncharacteristic for Shiro to use a poison, right? That's not one of his abilities. So when he said that, I'm like, oh, that's funny, because collective is actually here to stop shit like that. I hope y'all liked my collective voice. Collective actually stated that she speaks in small, like broken up sentences really fast. Kind of reminds me of Solace, the Solarian from Mass Effect. You remember, he talks real fast like that. But so that's going on. Meanwhile, Nyla and Vector, they're locked up. But remember, Akari, or Maxima Nagamoto, is also locked up, but because of her telepathy and manipulation, she's able to manipulate one of the councilmen to get her special treatment. And she uses this special treatment to work with the families on the outside to get her broken out. And you know, we see Yen Namagato, aka Muramusa. He's trying to get his sister out, and he also used this opportunity. He sends Death Trigger to get her out, but he's also using this opportunity to take Atlas out, which I thought was interesting, because all of Jeremiah's efforts and focus was in Nebu, and there was nothing in his submission about protecting Atlas. Maybe he didn't feel he needed to, which normally you wouldn't. I mean, who's gunning for Atlas until now? So Yin Nagamoto kind of took advantage of the situation. Atlas is vulnerable because there's no written details to defend it, and so he capitalizes on that, and he attacks Atlas. And so he sends Death Trigger to help Akira escape. She pretty much did a lot of the groundwork. She was in a good position to be freed. And Death Trigger, we see Death Trigger come, and there was a moment when I was putting that scene together where I wanted there to be a lot of gunfire and stuff, but at the same time, all this was happening in complete silence, because Death Trigger could control sound, so it was all happening in silence, but I still wanted there to be music. So I actually spent like a half hour debating on whether I wanted there to be music in that scene or sound effects, but if it was just silent, it kind of would have been whack. But just kind of imagine that whole scene happening quietly. So Death Trigger comes, and Yin is reunited with Akari, and they're able to escape. So that was her story option, was because you got to use a story option to escape bondage when you're captured. There's gonna be a lot of system changes, so We're probably going to be moving away from, hey, if you're captured, you got to use this, you know. We're introduced to a scene where, so check this out. So the reason everybody is held captive and weakened, all of the Nebu people were weakened because of the Atlas Balisk. The Atlas Balisk is pretty much a constant area effect debilitating all the Nebu people. The Nebu people that are enemy, that are being enslaved or captured, that aren't corrupt, they're very powerful people, because when Makai created this race, they have an affinity for chi manipulation. Remember, Makai Thunuichi, he had the chi form. They all did, but the Balisk suppresses all of that. So what happens is, you know, you have Jeremiah getting everything going in preparation for the Futurist to come, and does what he has to do with his friends. And all of a sudden, this creature comes out of nowhere. Illuman. Illuman is some sort of, I'll read his character page to you. Illuman. Sounds like a Digimon, right? Illuman. The world be in an endless dream, skinny but monstrous being. It has an all-black body with glowing blue eyes. It talks like a lunatic. Illuman can create, shape, enter, manipulate the dreams of oneself and others, including modifying, suppressing, fabricating, influencing, manifesting, sensing, and observing dreams, as well as nightmares, daydreams, etc., possibly including past ones. Illuman can produce and modify dreams, bestow nightmares or lucid dreaming, and trap people in REM sleep, and promote spiritual, emotional healing within dreams. He's a master manipulator. Illuman deliberately creates an imbalance of power and exploits the victims to serve his agenda. He knows how to detect your weaknesses for the betterment of his life. Even though Illuman doesn't need to fight most of the times, he has a deadly combat proficiency. All right. So Illuman is a new character, and he's going straight for the Atlas Balisk. So he chose the Futurist, but not to oppose Jeremiah, not to oppose the Futurist. He wanted some of that good old Atlas Balisk dream meat. So he comes into the fray. He's going straight for that. So when I saw that submission, I'm like, okay, how can I justify the Nebu people uprising and being able to fight Jeremiah if the Atlas Balisk was keeping them suppressed? Cue Illuman. He comes in. He says Illuman will use the Authoria dimension to sense the power of the Futurist, modify the dream the Futurist has manifested into his own to become more powerful, and then go back into his dimension. So I interpret that as, I'm going to come and I'm going to eat the Atlas Balisk, get some strength that I'm absorbing from the dream power, and then I'm going to go back to sleep. So that's why Illuman comes in, he tears up the Atlas Balisk, gets very strong, and then bounces out. This created a window of opportunity for Nyla Vector to escape, and for the Pillar of Nebu Obelisk and Amun to get a leg up. You know, there was an episode leading up to the finales where we saw well, actually earlier in episode, Ra, who's a character and a new player, she's caught in the mix of Jeremiah's oppression. Her people are being oppressed, taken prisoner, if they don't, fall in line. And her father sacrificed his life for her to escape. So when we see her running through the town trying to remain unnoticed, and she's able to do so, unlike some others who were sneaking around, the Balisk saw them, which is just a testament to her stealthing. She comes across the Nebu heroes, and the Nebu heroes are Balisk, the Obelisk and Amun at the lodge of Nebu heroes, and she joins with them because she sees that they're already fighting and resisting, and they're quite successful at it. But anyway, the Atlas Balisk attacks the Balisk, which in turn allows Nyla and Vector to get free. And then we see Nyla and Vector make their way out of the prison, and they meet up with the Obelisk, Ra, and Amun. But Illuman is his own entity, he's not allied with anyone at this point. He just wanted to get his grub on, and so he affected the Balisk. Ultimately, he got what he came for. The Futurist was able to kind of get him out of here. Lucky for him. I mean, it was really more so of a choice for Illuman to leave. If Illuman said, I want to kill everybody, or I want to get more involved, that would have been a totally different episode. But the fact that he says he wrote in the submission, and then he goes back into his dimension, I said, oh, cool. That means I can have you come in, serve your purpose, open up and create opportunity for something else to happen. And then I can get you out of here because you're very powerful. So that's that. That's why that happened the way it did. So yeah, Ra, she tags up. Let me bring up Ra real quick, because Ra is an interesting. Sorry for being all close. Ra, and I don't know if Ra, Amun, and Obelisk know each other because they have like Egyptian god names. That's kind of cool. But they all ended up working with each other in the game. So Ra says Ra uses her sun manipulate. Now Ra is a new character, and she has the ability to manipulate the sun. And she stands for Nebu and her people. So obviously she's against Jeremiah and his takeover. And her father died saving her from the chains of the Atlas Balisk. Ra says, using my sun manipulation to create magnetic fields that will prevent any magnetism to be used. I will use extreme heat on the opposition to keep them disoriented, and we saw that used when she was fighting Jace Beleren, but we'll get on that later. And then I will use my stuff to come behind them and hit with mini supernova. So to kind of make a dramatic, I wanted to show that Ra was doing this for her people. She was courageous, she was fearful, she was inspired by her favorite heroes growing up. Amun and Obelisk are like the heroes of Nebu. So she saw them and she wanted to help. That's why she was out in that battlefield, and Obelisk was like, yo kid, because Ra, I'm assuming, is a young woman, get out of here, and he had to take a bullet for her, which could have killed her. But she's naive, maybe not super battle hardened. I didn't get that from her bio. So she was in danger, but her heart was in the right place. And eventually they learned, they protected her, and she found how she can kind of work with them. But we see Amun and Obelisk cleaning up house. I wanted to make it apparent that Obelisk is a force of nature. Throughout the whole episode, he was getting stronger and stronger. Their attacks were becoming more and more ineffective. Amun was strategizing and supporting him. Amun is a beast in himself. And that's when we see them meet up with Nyla and Vector. I pictured this giant pyramid or structure in the center of town, of the city, of the capital. This is what the Nebu people were being used to create. It was all for the purpose of this ritual for the Necrofiends. It created this pillar where all this is occurring. And then at the end of the episode, we see them running up to face Jace Beleren, to face Jeremiah and the Necrofiends at the top. But they are intercepted by the enforcers. So we see the collective again, and then we're first introduced to Jace Beleren. They jump off of this giant metal helicopter that we found out is being manipulated by Henri Gosselin, who is another enforcer who can manipulate metal. And he, it turns into his armor and he lands. And before you know it, we have the collective, Jace Beleren, Henri Gosselin standing before Obelisk, Amun, Ra, Vector, and Nyla. They're outnumbered, but they're a unit. They fight together, and they had a formation. Jace Beleren is a very, very powerful telepath. The collective, she has all kinds of things, you know, the nanobots, the electromagnetism, I believe she has. She's very intelligent. You got Dennis Bateman, who's also there, but you can't see him because he's an assassin. He comes in and out. And then you got Henri Gosselin, who is a metal manipulator, a fighter, and he's like a tank. And we see him and Obelisk going at it. But you know, it was a good fight. I really wanted to highlight the fact that Jace Beleren was you know, he had a major influence because of how he was approaching it. Let me pull up Jace Beleren. Jace Beleren says he would use his intelligence to create a flawless battle strategy, which is why a lot of that played out the way it did. I used my I think he meant telepathy, to create telepathic links between Jeremiah, allies, and myself so that we can communicate with each other without others hearing our strategies. So that's why they didn't really talk much while they were fighting. And that's why they were so well coordinated. If you remember a scene, A Moon comes up with a perfect plan, but it flops and it just does terrible. They actually start getting beat even more because Jace Beleren takes his thoughts and forms a counter plan to it. And then damage and steal memories of enemies to make them non-hostile to the Futurist and Jeremiah. You weren't even letting them get that close, so I kind of flipped that and made it so that they turn hostile to each other. So that's why you get the scene where Vector and Nyla are attacking A Moon, and he's trying not to kill them, right? But you got to remember too, out of all of this, that if you recall, Selena Rend was there. She was with Jeremiah. Something to think about. So I don't know what kind of relationship they have, but Selena Rend was there. She was standing with Jeremiah, and she's kind of like the last line of defense. Jeremiah's like, yo, stay close. Remember, he's like, yo, stay close. So they might have something going on between Selena and Jeremiah. But ultimately what ends up happening is Selena Rend comes and she just finishes off everybody. She rips out Vector's throat. Somebody had to die, and I chose Vector. And there's a reason for that, and that'll be explained in the finale. But Selena comes and she takes out everybody. Why they were, you know, and they were like thrown off, you know, thrown away, you know, just neutralized. And then we get a new character who's a new player to the game. Two characters, actually. After Selena comes, we get Vulcan Almighty and Omnimus. Vulcan Almighty and Omnimus make their debut. And these two characters, and when I saw their submission, I was like, yeah, I definitely got to make this like the final battle, you know what I mean? So let's start off with Vulcan Almighty. So Vulcan Almighty, he's a scientist and mage. Lean, always trying to push how much he can learn. He's a dork. He's a nice guy. He has antimatter magic. You know, he makes use of rituals, symbols, actions, gestures, language to exploit supernatural forces to varying degrees with only their skill. Personal power level, imagination, knowledge, and or morality to define the borders. He has enhanced willpower, personal domain. He's a beast. Vulcan Almighty is a man who has practiced the ways of magic to create a sort of bridge between what is science and what is magic, to different areas that Vulcan studied under the teachings of Dr. Skriller, where he learned the Panet theory. After the Grinfall event occurred, Vulcan Almighty was gifted with the power to manipulate magic. So he kind of carries on the whole planet theory, Dr. Skriller legacy. So he arrives, and with him is a creature or a being, a entity called Omnimus. Omnimus is slender with no eyebrows, no mouth. When using his powers, the cosmos display on his entire body. He has a blank personality. His ability is fusionism. He can fuse with another character for the entire phase. He can fuse items to make more powerful items. He can fuse natural energies of the universe with another player's abilities. He has maximum power. Omnimus can create cosmic constructs that can imprison his targets even if the target is a spirit. Cosmic awareness can help Omnimus understand all things in the universe. Long story short, these two arrive and the collective is laughing at them. The collective is like, who's this chump? And then they fuse with each other. So in their submission, and I'll start off with Vulcan Almighty. When Vulcan and Omnimus fuse, they form Omni Almighty and will use their combat clones to create 1,000 clones to combat Jo. He will use Magic Blast to take them out. With his enhanced willpower, he won't have any power. He won't have any power with telepaths. He won't have any issues with telepaths, I'm assuming he meant to say. And then Omnimus said, I will fuse with Vulcan Almighty, making Omni Almighty. I will fuse the very energies the Atlas Balisk is made of with Vulcan's Magic Blast. I left that out. With my power of absolute defense, we will encase JO's lackeys in force fields to ensure they are out of battle. And when the mission is done, Omnimus will go into a state of regeneration. Okay, so that's why when you saw, you know, that happened, I actually rolled them against Selena. Selena's a very powerful person by herself. I fused them and gave them some bonuses, and I rolled them against Selena. We saw the fight scene. He was able to dispatch of her very easily. He's not a fighter. He's more of a magician, which is why you didn't see a lot of hand to hand. He was just imprisoning people and throwing them away. Ultimately, that role was lost. He won against Selena, but the grand scheme of things, he failed against Jeremiah and the whole caboodle. But he won against Selena, so that's why he got past Selena. But ultimately, it came down to, because if you're opposing Jeremiah, you're also opposing the Futurist, which in turn you're opposing the Necrofiends. So it would have been very hard. It would have been very hard. You would need like R-Type X on your team or something. Anyway. So Omni Almighty gets to Jo, and Deftude steps in, and Deftude uses the same card, but with some other cards that he summons Manowar, which is a manifestation of Resonoc's innocence and favorite comic book characters. Kind of goes into the innocence thing, and he summons Manowar, but he also summons, because Manowar is a comic book character from the Gamma Friends, which was submitted by a player. But we had a lore contest in remembrance of Stan Lee. Rest in peace. And it was about some comic characters that were also allies of Manowar. And that's because I knew I wanted to have them appear in the episodes as enemies. So I was like, oh, let's get the Gamma Friends versus Omni Almighty. Didn't delve too deep into that, but Deftude puts Omni Almighty, you know, to a halt by summoning the Gamma Friends, Friar Fish, and the Unstoppable Rhino, and these were characters that were submitted in a lore contest. The players had an opportunity to come up with comic characters, and I think the prompt was, what were some characters that could be just as popular as Manowar? or why weren't they as popular or something like that. So anyway, they were all summoned and they fought. And I knew the only way to, the way it played out is the only way to defeat Omni Almighty would probably be to get him to shake Jeremiah's hand, and he did. So they were forced to split apart to kind of break that curse of that handshake. And by then, after they split apart, they're neutralized because Omnimus has to regenerate, right? So, and they were weakened. They were beat up by the Gamma friends. So that got rid of them. And then ultimately, that leaves the ritual left. And so what you got was, we learned that Serenity actually wasn't there. So they failed, or it was postponed pretty much, because of John Musketmouth and kind of Jeremiah, right? Because Jeremiah is the reason she wasn't really there to begin with. So kind of Jeremiah brought that upon them. But you know, they are the NPCs, Jeremiah is the player. So technically Jeremiah was successful. Again, in the grand scheme of things, Jeremiah won the role. And the NPCs, the Necrofiends, they pretty much left, and they're, you know, who knows what they're going to do next. That's what the finale is going to be. The finale is going to wrap all this up. But Jeremiah, he survived, and he's left with the, you know, pretty much the city, and, you know, everything's still fine. Obviously he has some things he has to tend to. But there was a question about from the player about Val, the collective. She asks, could Jace Beleren and I get some more details about our current situation? Omni Almighty imprisoned us in the cosmic maxim construct. That's a good question. So the way the game works is I write things a certain way to get something done for a particular episode. However you pick up whatever event you pick next, I'm gonna come up with something that works in between, so it makes sense. Okay, you're not like locked in a cube. I'm probably gonna say something like, you know, the cube broke when he died, or when he got this, when he, you know, split apart. The construct, you know, in the next episode you'll just be back to normal again. I'll let, you know, you decide, you know, what happened in between. You can use your imagination to determine what happened in between, but a lot of it comes down to me just bridging the gaps with narrative, or leaving it up for others to kind of figure out what happened. So to answer your question, your current situation is, there is no current situation. If you're still working with Jeremiah, I would assume you're still in Nibu. But I've seen players jump from all over the place. It makes it harder for me to bridge the gap. But the point of this is to make it so that it's easy for the players to do what they want to do in terms of what events they want to go to. The only time whenever there really is a situation, is if a player is saying, hey, I want to kidnap this person, and then they're successful. Then that's when you got to start using a story phase to kind of break free. Kind of like Akira. So, I mean, Akari, she used the story option to kind of break free. And she was successful. Otherwise, she would still be in their hot, you know, still be a captive, which is what I'm trying to get away from. So I'm glad she was able to get away. Selena asks, can Selena leave the, so remember, Selena is tossed away. Selena's tossed away, and she gets up, and she is attacked by something else. So this is even more interesting. So there's another character that joined the game, and this character chose a story option. And this character's name is Iglis. Now, Iglis is an interesting character. Iglis, the soul swapper, the soul that was given the chance to reclaim his life, is what he has here in details. He's a bodiless soul. He's collected. He has his own agenda. He has soul manipulation. He's a tactical genius, and he has stealth combat. In his story option, he chose, or they, he chose, he will use his soul sensory to locate and lock onto Selena to find out where she is. When found, he will mask his soul energy and tactically analyze the field. By using his soul swap with perfect stealth combat, Iglis will swap with Selena Rend when she least expects it. So I read that and I say, well, that's perfect because Selena wears a lot of jewelry. And she encases a lot of souls, and similar to what she did with the Emperor of the Endless and the soul that she had trapped in that fist. I thought it would be cool to throw a nice little monkey wrench in the game by having Iglis be something that was actually trapped in one of her medallions that was deactivated from when Omni Almighty cracked or attacked her, or maybe cracked it or disenchanted it, and that would give him Iglis an opportunity to escape, and he does so, and he takes her body. I just felt it would be a perfect thing to do for his type of character, and especially because Selena Rend really isn't a woman. Selena Rend is a abyssal entity, and who loves that body. When she was given that body, she loves that body. So I thought it would be perfect to have that body taken from her. So Selena Rend asks, oh, and so her body's lost and she's sent back into the abyss. I did that for the sake of, I wasn't gonna put you in one of those fish on the fish stand. So to be safe, so you can have a home base, I just said you go back into the abyss. So when Selena asks, can Selena leave the abyssal realm without a vessel, or is she trapped until she can recover her old one or get a new one? And to that I'll answer, I'll say, I'll leave that up to you. I'll allow you and Ivan to come up with the rules of the abyss. To my knowledge, Ivan had you pretty much trapped in there. You had to pretty much ask for permission to get out of the abyssal realm. So that's why I thought maybe you would need permission from Ivan or some kind of vehicle to get out of there. But that's up to you. I'm sure you could use your abilities and keywords to justify you being able to get out of the abyss. It would have to make sense. You have a bunch of brothels around the town too, right? So I'm sure you can come up with something, or y'all can come up with the rules of how the abyss works. If we don't see a lot of abyssal creatures just running around until you actually came to the surface. So I don't know how it was prior to that. I don't know if they were locked in the abyssal realm because of Ivan, or if it was just because of you not wanting to go out there. I don't know, but I'll leave that up to you. So you can get a new body, you can try to get your body back, you can do whatever you want. That's why I thought it would be interesting to throw that in there to see what you do in return. Yeah, so Iglis is in Selena's body. So in regards to Akari and the Nagamatos, Nagamato crime family rises. One of the Nagamato players, I believe, asked, was Atlas completely removed from Haven by the Nagamatos? I would say their headquarters, the Atlas headquarters in Haven, it was destroyed, similar to if the White House, ended up being removed. Circuit took the money prior to it being destroyed, I would say anyway. So I would imagine there could still be some assets, some Atlas assets scattered about, similar to when the Gate Center was destroyed. Tempest had all these different assets that could still be recovered and salvaged, but it's not the whole Atlas. It's ground zero. Whatever that means, you know, Atlas has a bunch of businesses and buildings. I'll let Jeremiah figure that out. But yeah, for the most part, it was removed physically, and they took a financial hit because of Circuit hacking into their funds. Okay. All right, so on to rewards. Yin Nagamoto, you go from below average to average because you lost that first fight when you were first introduced, and that whole thing happened with the smoke show. But you're now back at average. The keyword that you get Haven Control. Haven Control. Whatever you want to do with that, you have Haven Control. However you want to interpret that, you have some control over Haven, similar to how Jeremiah had control, but you have a keyword now that says Haven Control. And I felt like that could simulate that crime family seeping into Haven. The same way you probably had a lot of sway and control in Dorinthia, you have some control in Haven, because the word is getting out that the Dorinthian crime families are making their way into Haven. So Haven Control is a keyword for Yin Nagamoto. Death Trigger, you go from average to above average. The keyword that you get is fame. Fame. You're working with the crime families now. When your name is getting out there, you are a mercenary that a lot of people probably want to get involved with or hire. Make way for watch out, Jacob Bastion. Jacob Bastion. Jacob Bastion. I skipped Jacob. Jacob. Jacob Bastion. Jacob, reach out to me in Discord so I can figure out what your rank is supposed to be. I lost my notes. And we'll discuss your rewards as well. Sorry for skipping you. And anyone else I might have looked over. Omni Almighty and Vulcan Almighty, you go from average to below average for the loss. Vulcan Almighty and Omnimus, you go from average to below average. Moon, you go from average to below average. Obelisk, below average to average to below average. Ra, average to below average. Henri Gosselin, you go from average to above average. The Collective, you go from average to above average. Henri, the keyword that you get is superior. You get the superior keyword. The Collective, you get the keyword oxygen. Henri, you get an item. You get access to Nebi Metal. reach out to me in Discord, because I want to talk to you about that. I don't want to announce it yet. The collective, you get Nebi records. As long as this is in your possession, you know of every existing Nibunese citizen and everything about them, including players. If they were born in Nibu, you know about them. Jace Balaran, you go from average to above average. You get the keyword resist, and you get the book of Nebi Fables. +2 to chances of success when going against Nebi heroes such as Obelisk and Amun. Jeremiah, you go from average to above average, and you get the keyword corrupt. Corrupt. I purposely did not give you an item because I feel like a lot was lost. Your item would have been the gamma eggs, but because that was kind of circumvented, nothing. But that was a very eventful event. It got kind of crazy. It was a lot of work, and if you have any questions and any more additional questions as to how things played out, definitely reach out and I'll explain. But I hope everybody liked everything that happened in that event. I know it was a lot, but hopefully it makes a little bit more sense now. Things got crazy when people started fusing with each other and comic book characters, and I think my personal favorite part was when Serenity turned into Soda, because I'm curious as to how many people saw that coming. Yeah.